말도 안 돼. 10백만 달러? 와, 드디어 했어! 비트코인 한 개가 1000만 달러라고! 인생이 바뀌는 순간이다.
시청자 여러분 상상해보세요. 비트코인 한 개가 1000만 달러라면 세상은 어떻게 바뀔까요? 그땐 비트코인이 세계 돈의 3분의 1. 달러와 나란히 국제 결제의 기본 통화가 되고 사람들은 가격을 달러가 아니라 사토시로 읽습니다. 집값? 주식값? 달러로 보면 그대로일지 몰라도 비트코인으로 보면 계속 떨어지는 느낌일 거예요. 은행 대출은 사라지고 AI는 일자리를 바꾸고 사람들은 열심히 일하기보다 열심히 보유하기를 택하죠. 이제 부의 공식은 단순합니다. 일찍 사고 오래 들고 믿고 기다려라. 20년 뒤 세상은 달러가 아니라 비트코인 단위로 움직입니다. 여러분의 통장 아직도 달러 기준인가요? 아니면 사토시로 미래를 보고 계신가요?
We wanted to talk about is what does the world look like at $10 million Bitcoin? So there's a number of different points and questions I have for you here, and we can have this discussion, but I kind of want to start off fairly open-ended and just, see from your perspective, what does the world look like at $10 million Bitcoin?
Well, I think the first thing to think about is $10 million Bitcoin means roughly $200 trillion market cap for Bitcoin. And if you look at kind of world money supply right now, right, global M2 global M3 is $150 trillion, right? Now that's going to grow. So that'll grow to 300 trillion in a decade. And I think there were Bitcoin 10 million, we're kind of realistically looking like 2 decades. So it's going to grow to about 600 trillion. So even then, Bitcoin will only represent a third of global money supply, but it will probably be bigger than the US dollar by then, right? In terms of, the size of it. And certainly relative to base money, it will probably exceed global base currency, which is all the money that the banks have at their central banks, plus all the actual cash. So I do think that, we're looking at a world at which Bitcoin is going to coexist with the dollar, right in the United States, right? It will coexist with the dollar. And I think even worldwide, it'll coexist with the dollar as the means of settling international transactions. So I think you have to start there, that we're going to get to a point, in 20 years, where we're going to have, Bitcoin will be part of the equation. I don't think it'll be everything, but I think it'll be part of the equation. And I do think that a lot of people are going to start to denominate things in sats. And I think that's really where things get interesting.
Awesome. I think that's a great starting point for us here. And I pretty much agree with everything you just mentioned. One common, hurdle that I think a lot of new people or people will have when we mention like, oh, Bitcoin can reach $10 million per coin one day, is they'll say like, oh, well, pizza at that point will cost $10,000 per pizza. So are you saying like, will this be in nominal terms? Will this be like somewhat real terms? Like, how are you thinking about, does $10 million Bitcoin mean hyperinflation?
No, I don't think it does. I mean, it might, right? There's some chance. There's always some chance of hyperinflation. I wouldn't say it's like a 0% chance. It's not on my bingo card really for what's going to happen in the next 2 years in America. Although, could we see sort of 1970s style inflation? Yeah, very possibly, right? We could see 10% inflation, 7 to 10% inflation. I think when you're dealing with inflation, you really have to ask yourself, as Michael Saylor said, it's a vector, right? So it's there's no one inflation rate. And I think specifically, if you're looking at, the inflation for a college student, right? Well, they're going to need the price of a Big Mac, right? The cost of, rental unit somewhere, right? And those things I don't think are going to go much beyond 4 or 5%. You know what I mean? I think those things. So I think that even if you're looking at 20 years out, you're looking at something like a little bit more than doubling, in terms of price. I look back at 20 years ago, things were not 5 times as expensive as they were 20 years ago for the base necessities. But then I think once you start looking at college education, luxury goods, those things are going up much higher, more like 10% a year. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember when I was in school, $20,000 a year was considered a lot. And, I'm paying $100,000 right now for NYU. So yeah. So that's a 5X,
Definitely. Yeah, it's crazy to think about. So yeah, I guess like your point overall is like, okay, Bitcoin can reach $10 million per coin over, next couple decade or two. And that doesn't necessarily mean hyperinflation.
No, I think there's some inflation. Like, I would say base case divide by 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somewhere between 3 and 4, right? Mm-hmm. So Bitcoin's going to go up 100x in purchasing power. It goes up 30x or 25x, but still amazing opportunity of purchasing power, life changing, right? For those who actually hold throughout the whole period.
Absolutely. And in this scenario, do you see it as just another asset still in a fairly diversified portfolio? Because as you mentioned, like it would be a part of the M2 or M3 money supply, not even necessarily a majority of it. Real estate would probably be bigger if I had to guess. Equities might still even be bigger. How do you think about that in the context of not just money itself, but other asset classes? I kind of want to shift more towards like the world once we're at $10 million Bitcoin and higher. I feel like a common topic for academics or like Keynesian economists would be like, okay, if Bitcoin is money or this form of money and it's deflationary or like its purchasing power is increasing every year in terms of like basic consumer goods, that's bad for the economy. How would you, and perhaps that's bad for a number of different reasons they might argue. I'm curious, how would you reply to something like that?
Well, I think the transition is going to be very, very tough, right? So transition is not going to be easy because, right now we're in a very credit-driven system. So, that big asset class of real estate has underperformed money printing, right? So if you look at the graph of money printing, it's there, M2, right? Real estate's sort of below that, right? So what does real estate look like in a world where they go fixed supply? Well, down, right? It's just a depreciating asset, which kind of makes sense, right? Like, why would you want to buy an old house? It's sort of like a car. You want to buy a car with 100,000 miles on it and pay more for it than a new car? No. So I feel like real estate's going to go down. It's just going to be, once we reach that point, real estate will be a forever depreciating asset, right? So for everybody who, all of my boomer cohorts who bought real estate and that's their main asset, well, their main asset's going to go down forever, right? So
I agree. So do you think real estate investing as a whole will die, or will it be like more of a business? Like people will still build things and sell it.
Yeah, I think people will build, and I think right now in Japan, real estate is a depreciating asset. Okay, for various reasons. They have older generation. Nobody wants to live anywhere. It's a depreciating asset. People still build. They just sort of price the thing at how much can I rent this thing out, given that it's going depreciating, and I get a certain amount of rental for a depreciating asset, right? On the other hand, it's great for people, right? They get cheaper places to live, right? It's good. Yeah. So it's different does not mean it's bad. right?
Agreed.
So
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, so that thing is it's good. Now, I think so much of our world is built around credit and around debt that I think it requires a complete rethink, right? That doesn't mean it's bad. I do think that, the current monetary economists they're all, they think deflation is terrifying to them, right? Because it is. If you're in a world of heavily indebted,
Yeah.
if you're heavily indebted, the last thing you want is deflation, right? Like, wait a second, you just took a 30-year loan out on a place and your place is worth less. Terrible, right? Just the only way that this makes any sense is if the thing goes up in price, right? You don't want to have a lot of debt with deflation. It is toxic. But what that means is there's going to be a lot less debt. A lot less debt. Now, the question is, do we need to have all this debt to make an economy? And my answer is no, you don't need a lot of debt. Debt, this amount of debt that we're living with is only a function of the fact that we have, this ever-ending supply of credit, but through the banks and through the central banks and governments, just, But I think all that stuff's going to end when we go to not end completely, but it's going to change dramatically when we get to a hard money system.
Yeah. So I guess like when we're at $10 million Bitcoin, which is still going to be like that hybrid system, do you think at that point we'll still have dollar-based mortgages and so on and so forth? Or will that be like starting to be phased out or become more expensive than maybe it might appear to be today?
Yeah, I think there's going to be both systems, right? And so the question really is the price of goods and services going to be more stable in Bitcoin terms at that point, or more stable in terms of dollar terms? So one of the things right now, if people say, well, I can't use Bitcoin because it's way too volatile, which forget the price of Bitcoin. Just talk about the purchasing power of Bitcoin, right? It's very volatile right now, right?
Yeah.
You can live for, let's say you could live for a year off one Bitcoin at 100,000, and then all of a sudden you can't live off of it at 20,000, right? Then you could live like a king off of it at $1 million, right? So I expect that the purchasing power of Bitcoin in terms of goods and services is going to be more stable 20 years from now than fiat. Fiat's going to be unstable. It's going to start getting unstable, right? I think that we're going to have, big inflation, big drops. I mean, we could see people, and I think a lot of people will be like, look, I just don't even want to deal with fiat, right? It's too unstable. So I think the same criticism that people have about Bitcoin right now, they're going to have about fiat. They're going to say fiat's too unstable. I just don't want to deal with it. I'm a Bitcoin only kind of shop. And I think people are going to start thinking in terms of Bitcoin more, and I think companies in particular are going to start thinking, okay, how should I look at my balance sheet? Well, they're going to have to do two numbers. What's my balance sheet in Bitcoin? What's my balance sheet in dollars, right? And did I make money in Bitcoin terms, or did I start losing money in Bitcoin terms, or did they make money in Bitcoin terms?
Yep, I agree. That's definitely.
So I think it changes a lot.
Where do you think we'll have that inflection point where Bitcoin becomes less volatile in purchasing power terms compared to the dollar? Like, will that be at $10 million Bitcoin? Will that be at 1 million? Will that be?
No, it won't be at 1 million.
Yeah,
look, 10 million, we're getting close to the end of this journey. Okay. Now, I'm not saying the end, but, at 10 million, Bitcoin is probably the largest currency.
Yeah.
So it's like when you get to right now, you rank the currencies, dollar, yen, won, yen, pound, Bitcoin, it's down there. But like Bitcoin will be the largest currency in 20 years, right? And so once you get to that largest position, and it'll be bigger than gold, right? So that kind of number is, I think it forces people to start denominating things in Bitcoin.
오늘의 결론은 분명합니다. 비트코인 한 개 1,000만 달러의 세상, 그것은 단순히 가격 상승이 아니라 통화체계의 진화입니다. 달러와 공존하되 점점 더 많은 사람들이 사토시 단위로 세상을 바라보게 될 겁니다. 부동산, 주식, 부채 중심의 경제는 서서히 힘을 잃고 하드머니와 기술 그리고 시간의 복리가 새로운 부에 축이 됩니다. 결국 질문은 하나로 귀결됩니다. 여러분의 자산은 시간을 이기고 있습니까? 이제 여러분의 선택이 20년 뒤의 세계를 바꿉니다. 오늘 영상이 도움이 되셨다면 구독과 좋아요로 함께 미래를 준비하세요.